friends and ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, I really only wish it could have been in better times. Nevertheless, I am pleased that you are here this evening to join me in welcoming our dear guest, friend, our honorable guest tonight, the very Reverend Dr. Munther Issac, my very dear friend, the Reverend Pastor of the Lutheran Church in Bethlehem. Reverend Issac is one of the pillars of the Palestinian Christian community and a leading light for many of us. So we are honored to have him here with us this evening. Friends, we wanted to be here at this historical venue, not only because it is fitting for our guest. Not sure how Baptists and Lutherans get along. Do you? But because of the esteemed history of the Bloomsbury Baptist Church, Dr. Simon Woodman, for over 170 years, this church has played an important role in serving its community and in supporting all those that are marginalized, dispossessed, and fighting for their rights. As early as 1850s, this church took a strong stand against those that practiced or condoned slavery. It provided essential public services for women and children from families facing economic hardship. Please join me in thanking Reverend Dr. Simon Woodman and this church. Also join me in thanking the brilliant, energetic, inspiring team of the Palestine Mission to the UK who have organized tonight's evening. And in 1961, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King delivered his first London sermon from this very venue, from this very podium. Dr. King is, of course, known for his leadership and tireless commitment to the civil rights movements in the US. His hope, fueled by an unwavering conviction for justice and equality. If you can't fly, then run, he said. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, you have to keep moving forward. And though we are living in the darkest of days, though we are witnessing an ongoing genocide against our people, the Palestinian people, and though Israel is entering its endgame with clear intention to push people out of Gaza, out of Palestine, in a bloodier repeat of the 1948 Nakba. It is King's words of hope that should nurture us all. We will fly, we will run, or crawl, so long as it takes to liberate Palestine and liberate our people. We will do so until justice is served, until we, the Palestinian people, are treated equally to all other peoples in this world, until we can raise our children in safety and peace, and with freedom and dignity, without an occupation choking our existence. So, my friends, we are in the 5th month of the bombardment of Gaza. 100,000 people have been killed. Innocent people have been killed, maimed or injured, trapped under the rubble or missing, the vast majority of whom are children and women. What is happening is truly unconscionable. unimaginable. It is ethnic cleansing, mass expulsion, mass starvation, mass disease. It is genocide. That is, and that in this day and age, until this day and age, this level of carnage could be normalized, and the international community locks on. Failing to act and doing nothing to stop the bloodshed, they say that the future is our children. Israel killed 12,000 Palestinian children in less than 130 days. Unprecedented. That's more than any comparable period in modern history. More than 17,000 Palestinian children are orphaned, and parents resorting to writing the names of their children on their bodies so they can be identified if and when they are killed. Indeed, it was not an overt statement when the UN Secretary General said at the outset of this that Gaza has turned into a graveyard of children. So, my friends, the scale of the killings and destruction is unprecedented in modern history, in every sense, in every count. Israel has killed most doctors and medical staff, most UN aid workers, most journalists in human history. And now, we are seeing Israel preparing for another push into Rafah, the city of my birth. I'm a very proud Rafahian, where conditions are already horrific. 1.4 million sleeping in makeshift tents with nowhere left to go, in the cold, with no water, no food, no medicine, and still being bombed. And the response of the international community? Words, statements of sympathy, empty, hollow words. And those words are not enough. Words are not enough. We are past the time for mere condemnations and concern. It is time for states to act in accordance with their own laws, their own obligations, their own responsibilities, in accordance with responsibilities under international law and obligations under international law. If not for any moral convictions they may have. South Africa has shown how states should behave. And please give an applaud to South Africa, because they did. Utilizing the tools and instruments of the international rules-based order, a system that we all agreed on after the horrors of the Second World War. All of us said never again, but the never again was meant for all of us, not some of us, not the few, but every one of us. Never again, we said, and yet here we are again. How much more blood must be shed before these communities and these countries and these governments take any action and hold Israel to account? Last month, the highest court in the world, the ICJ, the International Court of Justice, officially put Israel on trial for genocide. We should not have a discussion after that. This is the highest court, saying that there is substantial evidence, plausible evidence, of Israel committing the crime of all crimes, which is genocide. And now Israel is officially on trial for genocide. It is the responsibility of every state, including the United Kingdom, to support the ICJ in investigating and holding Israel to account for its crimes. It is the responsibility of every state to stop arming Israel and implicating themselves in Israel's genocidal campaign. This is the law, by the way. And the ruling of the ICJ is very clear. It does implicate third parties that are complicit. And we will pursue this. It is the responsibility of every state to listen and take note when over 70% of its citizens, the British people, are calling for a ceasefire from the second week of the aggression. More than 70%. So not only it's anti-domestic law, not only it's anti-international law, it's anti-democratic. So friends, earlier today we attended a peaceful rally for Palestine and for peace. It is heartening to see that while the leaders are failing us, the people and the public conscience, our collective humanity, is so alive and kicking and outpouring and inspiring. In these challenging times, it is important that we hold on to this solidarity and continue to give each other hope for a better future and a better world. And with that, allow me to welcome my very dear friend, Reverend Dr. Munther Issac.
Your Excellency, أخوي صديقي Husam, Reverend Simon, and dear friends, I wish I was here in different circumstances. Yet in the midst of pain and darkness, what a beautiful image for us to meet in a church from different backgrounds, all united in our thirsty for justice. This is amazing, and I'm really grateful for this moment. I come to the UK with a heavy heart and with contradictory feelings. Never would I have expected that I will still be calling for a ceasefire 130 days after this war broke. It's amazing. What happened to humanity? What is wrong with us? Do Palestinians matter? I come to the UK with its history of colonialism. I think of the infamous supremacist Balfour Declaration and the consequences it carries even today on our lives. Has the UK apologized yet? Has it taken responsibility? I come here knowing too well that for 76 years, the UK has provided unwavering support to Israel, even when Israel continues to occupy Palestinian land, build settlements, promote ultra-nationalistic and exclusive ideologies, and sustain a system of apartheid in our land, as attested by numerous respected organizations. With all of this, the support continues. And I come here knowing too well that the UK Prime Minister, like many other Western leaders, came to Tel Aviv immediately after October 7th to provide cover and to give the green light for this genocide and to offer to pay the bill. And what's really appalling is that all these politicians later are concerned. They want to tell us. They raise concern about the number of civilian kills. No, we don't believe that. You came and gave the green light to this. And what's even more frustrating, Israel alleges that some members from UNRWA were involved in the attacks on October 7th, and support to UNRWA immediately stops directly from countries around the world, including the UK. The amount of hypocrisy is incomprehensible. And the level of racism involved in such hypocrisy is appalling. We are tired of this. We are tired of this hypocrisy. We are tired of being dehumanized. We are tired of the distorted narratives that portray us as the aggressors, whereas in reality, we are colonized and occupied. as my good friend Husam said, the situation in Gaza is beyond horrible. The stories we hear from those on the ground in Gaza are horror stories. It's literally hell on earth. Non-stop bombing every hour of the day. A friend of mine said 1 hour in this war is worse than all previous wars combined. They don't sleep. And they're bracing for their death. They feel like dead people walking. This is how they feel. They're posting farewell messages on social media. And there is no safe place. They go to a church or to a mosque, it's bombed. They go to Rafah in the south, it's bombed. They go to UNRWA schools, they're bombed. And every time we see children being pulled from under the rubble, we ask, does the world really care? This war indeed did not start in October 7th. When we say this and when we insist that this did not start on October 7th, this is not justifying what happened then. But it's about understanding the context. You know, there is a question now in the media, I hear it. What is an appropriate response to what happened on October 7th? So as a Palestinian, allow me to ask, what is an appropriate response to 76 years of ethnic cleansing and oppression? Let us remember that 70% of the people of Gaza are refugees from the 1948 Nakba, and they still have not been granted their rights or compensation. Most media frame this as an October 7th war, but in reality, this is a continuation of our Nakba. Our Nakba continues. And to those who rush to demonize Palestinians, and I've been asked this all the time on interviews, I want you to try to walk in our shoes. Imagine being always and constantly displaced. And I want you to live not 17 years, but 17 months under the siege in Gaza, which they have been enduring before the war. And then I want to see how you will react before casting any moral judgments on the people of Gaza. So no one is talking about the context. No one is talking about the fact that these are people who are being denied their rights of return to their villages, and that the state of Israel was built on the ruins of their villages and towns. We're not talking about this. And we're not talking about, when we say this, we're not talking about something that happened hundreds of years ago. We're talking about 76 years ago. And to me, it's outrageous and shocking how everybody wants to convince us that we should accept that Jews are entitled to the land because they lived here 2,000 years ago, while the people of Gaza should not be allowed to go back to their towns and cities from 1948. And there is so much talk about the deteriorating humanitarian situation in Gaza because of the war. And what's really deflating to us is that they're negotiating how much humanitarian aid should get to the people of Gaza. I mean, do you see how low we've got? But to understand why is this happening, when people are talking about the humanitarian situation, I ask, and in our anger and frustration, we ask, where were you for the last 17 years? Gaza was hell before October 7th. There was food, electricity, and water shortage before October 7th. In fact, in 2021, Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the United Nations, said, if there is hell on earth, it is the lives of children in Gaza. And imagine he said this before October 7th. The situation has been unbearable for years, leading to very high despair, unemployment, and even suicide rates among youth in Gaza before October 7th. Tragically, those of us who've been advocating for the end of the siege, we saw this coming. 76 years of displacement, settler violence, segregation, and aggressive settlement building. A system that has been described as apartheid by leading human rights organizations, including Israel's B'Tselem and many others, Human Rights Watch, Amnesty, and others. And of course, do we hear words of condemnation? Do we hear any response about these reports? And I continue to ask, does the international law matter as you continue to educate us? What about all these talks about the international law and human rights? Well, they're telling you there is apartheid in Palestine. What have you done? What have you done? And then Israel today is led by an extreme government that has openly declared, and I quote, "The Jewish people have an exclusive and unalienable right to all parts of the land of Israel." This is the official line of the current Israeli government. Where is the uproar? Where is the condemnation? Did the UK cut its ties with Israel? Did I miss something? And then the ICJ, what was the response? This is the context, and we are outraged when the media and politicians continue to choose to ignore this context. And all of this is because it's been years of constant dehumanization of the Palestinians. I can still remember when Biden responded to a question about the high number of civilians killed by Israeli airstrikes. And he said he had no confidence in the numbers that Palestinians are using. This remark, which can be characterized as racist, minimizes the scale of death of Palestinians in Gaza. It's as if our lives don't matter. You know, the world responded with great sympathy and empathy to the killing of 1,200 Israelis on October 7th, painting their monuments with the flag of Israel. More than 30,000 Palestinian lives later, including 12,000 children, we are still waiting to see the Palestinian flag on any monument. And then, I think last week, a deputy national security advisor in the Biden administration described the genocide of almost 30,000 Palestinians as, and I quote, a misstep. A misstep. He said, "We are very aware that we have missteps in the course of responding to this crisis since October 7th. This according to a recording of the gathering by the New York Times. A misstep. Friends, a misstep is when you take the wrong turn. The killing of 12,000 children is a war crime. It is a genocide. You don't talk about it as a misstep. And of course, this came after Biden described Israel's military responses in Gaza as over the top. You know, if it was only 5,000 children killed, maybe it's under the top. 10,000, we're close. 12,000, it's over the top. The destruction of an entire population is described as over the top. This is racism at its worst. The Western colonial narrative also uses the language of good versus evil. We saw this in Netanyahu. He used it, and many others have. Talk about a war between the civilized and the uncivilized, even claiming that they're fighting a war on behalf of all of you. But of course, when people talk about Hamas, and I always tell church leaders who come to visit us now in Bethlehem, I say, when you describe what happened on October 7th, you go to the dictionary and you find every bad word. Brutal, inhumane, even animals. But when you talk about Israel, it's just description, no condemnations. Israeli generals spoke about Palestinians as barbaric, forces of the dark. We saw nothing. So the worthlessness of the Palestinian life in the eyes of the Western world is on full display. And we saw it in the startling double standard expressed in comments by the European Union's chief, von der Leyen. While she labeled Russian attacks on Ukrainian civilian infrastructure, war, electricity, and heating as war crimes and terror, She described the very same actions of Israel in its war on Gaza as self-defense. Then came the International Court of Justice. And many in the Western world, in a stunning act of hypocrisy, sided with Israel. And I think it's important to pause here and remember who led the case in the ICJ. It was South Africa. It's really important. A country with a history of colonialism and apartheid. It is there where the moral credibility lies. And we should really take the lead of people who survived colonialism. Going back to the proceedings of the ICJ, the UK raised concern about the ICJ, not because its findings, not because it's finding that it is plausible that Israel is committing genocide, no. But because the case is, and I quote, not helpful in the goal of achieving a sustainable ceasefire. Not helpful. A Foreign Office spokesman said in a statement, to the UK, South Africa's decision to bring the case was, and I quote, wrong and provocative. This is complicity in a genocide. And as I said, this is the ultimate hypocrisy. Many times this makes us wish that we had blonde hair and blue eyes so that the world could care for us. Let us be clear, such attitudes go beyond hypocrisy. This is racism, coming from the very same people who lecture us on human rights and international law. When the killing of Palestinians does not matter the same way as the killing of Jews or Ukrainians, then something is tragically wrong with our world, with our humanity. To them, we Palestinians are collateral damage. They are talking about us as boxes in homes. Where do we take these Palestinians? Who should take them? Why doesn't he open the borders? They completely dismiss our rootedness in our land, our national identity. The idea that we are just, sorry to say, boxes that can be moved from one place to another, it's not just ethnic cleansing. This is what I'm talking about, the dehumanization of Palestinians. And the further feature of the Western narrative is the familiar account of Israel's victimization. Israeli journalist Gideon Levy has said that there have been many occupations in history, some perhaps even more brutal than this one, he says. But he says there has never been an occupier that portrays itself as the victim. Despite 75 years of Israel's violence towards an ethnic cleansing of Palestinians, Israel's actions are repeatedly described as self-defense. And don't get me started on the church leaders who repeated this rationale, this line of thinking. Self-defense. In turn, and before we are allowed to share our narrative, Palestinians are expected to begin every conversation by condemning Hamas, Palestinian violence as a whole, and the evil of anti-Semitism, along with defending our occupiers' right to exist. It's the cost of our being allowed to speak. And we're saying enough of this. We want back under pressure. And by the way, I don't condone violence. I believe in creative, non-violent resistance. Those who know my writings know this. But again, why isn't anybody talking about Palestinians' right to self-defense? The West Bank is internationally recognized as occupied. Do we have the right to defend ourselves under international law? Of course, if we defend ourselves against Israeli military, we are immediately labeled as terrorists. What's happening in Gaza is a genocide. It's a genocide through war crimes and ethnic cleansing. And we've been saying this from the very beginning. We knew what was happening. And in fact, as Palestinian and South African Christian leaders, we penned a letter in November making this case that this is a genocide before the ICJ. And even then, the director of the UN Human Rights Officer in New York resigned over what he says is the organization's failure to stop, and I quote, a textbook case of genocide, unquote, unfolding in Gaza. Truth is evident. We do not have to explain or argue for it. I'm not here to raise awareness, friends. I'm not here to reveal what's happening, to expose what's happening. This is the first genocide in history that is broadcasted live to the world. And it is being filmed by the victims themselves. No one can claim they did not know. The people of Gaza broadcast scenes of their genocide, and the war leaders declared to us and to the world their intentions to wipe out Gaza and really colonize it. But the world is still debating and deliberating whether what is happening is a war of genocide or not. It's amazing. Friends, truth is evident for all to see. There's nothing to debate. Apartheid is clear. You know, when our South African friends visit us in Bethlehem, they always say, we in South Africa don't need anyone to tell us what apartheid is. When we see it, we recognize it. And you know, many of them have told us, what you have in Palestine is worse than apartheid. The truth is clear. We don't need to explain it anymore. Truth is evident for all to see. Believe me, world leaders know the truth, but they are denying it. This is why I did not come here to educate or to explain or to open eyes. I come here hoping against hope that attitudes are exposed and hearts are changed. What we need today more than anything is courageous leaders and truth speakers. We need this in politics. We need this in religion. We need people of courage and conviction. We need moral political leaders, not interest-oriented political leaders. I think what's missing today in our world's politics is precisely that, morality. And I am tired and fed up of politicians and diplomats and, quite frankly, church leaders who share with me behind closed doors in confidentiality that they support us 100%, but that they are confined in what they can say in public. I'm fed up of this. I hear this all the time. You know how frustrating it is? Leaders in their comfort zone lack the courage to speak up, while the honorable people of Gaza risk everything for the sake of freedom and dignity. They have more honor and dignity than those politicians or faith leaders who don't have the courage to speak up. So my message as a Palestinian Christian pastor is simple. Those sitting on the side, and I have to be honest, including the church in many cases, are complicit in their silence. Martin Luther King Jr. was mentioned many times, and he's remembered among many things for saying, we remember not those who were against us, but those who were silent. At the beginning of the war, we wrote a letter signed by 12 leading Palestinian Christian organizations, call for repentance. In it we say, and I quote, we say it with broken heart. We hold Western church leaders and theologians who rally behind Israel's wars accountable for their theological and political complicity in the Israeli crimes against the Palestinians which have been committed over the last 75 years. End quote. We had to speak as Palestinian Christians. We couldn't be silent, even if it meant criticizing our own siblings. And today I say the same about the politicians and opinion makers who are still silent, hesitant, and shy in their positions and statements. The empty words, the diplomatic words, the toothless words, the words of concern and sympathy that mean nothing to us. Gaza is indeed a human cry. It's a moral cry. This is not about politics. If you are not shaken to the core and moved to act by the brutal killing of more than 12,000 children, there's something wrong with you. There's nothing we can do to restore you. So I believe the world will not recover and our humanity will not recover. History will not and should not be merciful towards those who are complicit. And this is why I said we will not accept apologies after the genocide. The names of those complicit in the genocide are stained in history books. Dear friends, I come to Bethlehem with a simple message. We need an immediate ceasefire. This is a moral obligation. And if we say it with conviction, we must work for it. Yes, we are tired of empty words. We're tired of promises that are never kept. But this should be the message right now, an immediate ceasefire. Because every day we delay delivering this message, hundreds of people will be killed. We cannot stop demanding this. And I know it's been 130 days. But we can't give up, and we can't give in to despair. We owe it to the people of Gaza. We owe it to their heroic sacrifices that we don't stop. We can't stop. We should not stop. We owe it to humanity because we can't allow ourselves to grow numb over a genocide. We cannot normalize a genocide. We can't stop. We must continue demonstrating. We must continue talking. We must continue praying until this genocide is over. And beyond that, we need an end to the Israeli occupation and oppression. We need an end to apartheid. We need justice and equality. I still hold fast to the hope, and it's really hard, to live in a land where people are equal regardless of their national, religious, or ethnic identity. I will never give up this dream. Never in my life have I been more proud and honored to be a Palestinian, more than the last 130 days. And it's difficult. I know it's painful. I'm proud of our resilience, of our sumud. I am proud of our solidarity with one another, with our unity. And when I say that we Palestinians will be okay and that we will recover, I say it because I know my people. I know who we are. Palestine is our homeland. We are deeply rooted there. And even for those Palestinians exiled around the world, Palestine still lives in them. Wherever I go, I see this. We will never relinquish our God-given rights of living in dignity and justice in our land. And we will not be satisfied until righteousness is achieved. And probably our biggest thing working for us as Palestinians is the justice of our cause. Our sumud, our steadfastness is anchored in our just cause and our historical rootedness in the land of our ancestors. And we are also encouraged and empowered by the costly solidarity and support of many around the world, challenging the dominance of ideologies of power and supremacy. And I saw it today in London. And even though my faith in God was shaken these last days, having seen way too many dead children and people, I continued to call and say that we cannot under any circumstance lose our faith in God. They can take everything from us, but not our faith in God. And particularly, our faith in His just character, the justice of God. The Psalm says, "For justice will prevail, and all the morally upright will be vindicated." we should never let go of this promise. Justice will prevail. So we refuse to give in. And I would like, in conclusion, to quote from a document, Kairos, Palestine, written by Palestinian Christians in 2009. But the words are so true today. In the absence of all hope, we cry out our cry of hope. We believe in God, good and just. We believe that God's goodness will finally triumph over the evil of hate and of death that still persists in our land. We will see here a new land and a new human being capable of rising up in the spirit to love each one of his or her brothers and sisters. End quote. We believe in God, good and just. So today I say, let justice roll, let freedom roll, let truth roll. And our cry remains, end this genocide now. May this come true today. Thank you. Thank you.